Hey, folks. I'm happy that you guys are here today. I'm Rob Felder, a part of the corporate trauma team.
I'm Jamal Sealy.
Hi, and I'm Holland Nance.
And today we're talking about perspective, understanding how someone else views things, how they see it, and how they stand in their shoes. So, with that being said, Jamal, when you think about perspective, you're thinking about the different things that you've encountered, that you've experienced. What comes to mind? What's been your experience?
Um, Robert, what comes to mind is how often um, people, kind of hide behind their rosy colored glasses. Everybody has the habit of looking at life through the rosy colored glasses or the lens that they choose to put on based on their experience. Um, and how seldom, especially in times of difficulty, people take those glasses off and try to see things for what it really is, or should I say, see what everybody else is seeing, right? And then, how this relates to corporate trauma is how we internalize, you know, perspective, our own perspective, and what we think or what we perceive other people's perspectives are. And then we begin to make up things based on where we don't have the data or the information to kind of fill in the gaps. And I'll give you a quick example. I recently learned that, anxiety, which is a symptom of corporate trauma, and excitement are biologically the same in the body. The same reactions, the same biological functions are going on. Raise blood pressure. You might break out in a light sweat, but based on perspective or your perception or how you are looking at something, your mind internalizes the same biological function as either anxiety or excitement. Obviously, we know anxiety brings about stress and malice and angst, and excitement brings about happiness and euphoria. So I think we really should take a look at what it would take to come out from behind our rosy colored glasses and try to see it from the other person's side.
Okay. And in regards to perspective, what comes to mind for you, Holland?
Thank you, Robert. For perspective in relationship to corporate trauma, perspective to me really speaks to a position of power, right? Because sometimes the results of corporate trauma can make you feel almost defenseless. But I think once we really understand all of the aspects that can be considered in regards to perspective, we really understand that we stand more in a position of power as opposed to being defenseless. And perspective really does help us either make the matter better, and sometimes it can even cause it to become even more intense. So understanding how powerful perspective can be in these instances really does help shift some of the control and the extent to which corporate trauma has impact in various parts of our overall life.
Okay. Jamal, do you think there's a benefit for those who may experience corporate trauma? Do you think there's a benefit for them to try and understand the perspective of those, or the companies or the corporations or the individuals who may be having them feel or experience that anxiety, that anger, that fear, the hollow effect, so on and so on?
Oh yeah, there's a definite advantage because once we begin to break down the mechanisms that give us those feelings, those primal emotions that are the causation of corporate trauma, what you will realize is that it is not you. See, the idea is that people try to internalize what they are feeling around them and say, well, I'm the reason this is happening because I didn't do this well, or because I didn't do this, or because I'm this way. When you take a quick look at the situation and understand that the peripheral things and the bigger scheme, that you know what, this situation is designed for me to kind of be in this position, and it's not really about me, but it's about my realization that this is not what I woke up today. I didn't wake up today to come in and to get into a negative reaction, but the environment kind of invites that. And so once we are able to have that, lack of a better phrase, that outer body experience, and kind of take a step back and look at what's really going on, we now are benefited, because now we know it's not us. So now we can anticipate the next move. We can proactively plan. We can set our boundaries, and we can, to Holland's point, take our power back and use our voice to kind of create that protective bubble, so that we can be the best professionals that we can be. That's the benefit of it.
Okay. So being able to see it from someone else's shoes, Holland, what do you think is the benefit of that? Or do you think that there's no benefit at all?
No, Robert, there is absolutely a benefit from seeing it from other people's points of view. And the key benefit is destroying the feelings of isolation, right? One of the most detrimental thoughts that we can ever have is, this is only happening to me. I am out here on an island by myself, experiencing this negative experience or having this negative response, and I am by myself. Well, when we begin to not only collaborate and speak out and talk to people, we understand that there are a lot more shared experiences than we would probably imagine. So understanding that not only the perspective and being able to see it from other points of view, but I have a little phrase that I call Yana. And the truth of the matter is, you are not alone, right? So when we understand that we're not alone, that we don't have to live through these issues in isolation, it helps us to shift the perspective to say, you're right, it's not about me. This is absolutely a part of this whole environment, this atmosphere. It's, just kind of the rules of the road. So understanding that you're not alone in that process helps you to elevate your perspective and understand that you can be a part of making some real positive changes, and internally becoming more assertive in understanding how you really can move this thing forward and move beyond it.
Awesome information. I know when I'm thinking about perspectives and thinking about those who may be in charge or just may be in a position, or they take the opportunity to do certain things that may make people feel uncomfortable. The first thing I'm trying to figure out is why, right? Because sometimes it may be you, sometimes it may be something or someone. And a lot of times, one thing I would always say is, before I make a conclusion, or I jump to a conclusion, let me figure it out. Let me use those critical thinking skills to kind of figure out the whole entire thing, because what I don't want someone to do is be able to pop up on me and kind of put together this whole entire fantasy about what happened, and I don't have no recourse, or I don't have a way to kind of combat what they say, because one thing I do know about individuals who do some shady things, or do some things that are questionable, is that they're quick on their feet, and they have their lie prepared for years. Once you say something happened, it's like, oh, well, you know what? It wasn't that. I didn't view the world that way. That's not the way I understand things to be. So the next question would be, in thinking about the benefits of different perspectives, what's some advice that you would give folks around how to handle how they view the world, their perspective? What's the best advice that you would offer?
Well, I always advise people that perspectives are important, especially when they are opposing. People often view opposition or disagreement as negative, right? And we know corporate trauma is about these negative experiences, interactions. We know corporate trauma does not happen in a vacuum. You can't be by yourself and suffer from corporate trauma. You have to have, polarity. But what exists in between the polarity, the North and South Pole, is the rest of the the habitat where everything else lives. I mean, one point of view is one extreme, the other point of view is another extreme. But what we're able to gather and ascertain in the middle is what we can use to kind of create a lively situation. So changing your perspective on what is opposing your point of view. I heard someone break down the word controversial. Controversial really just means counter your version of the truth. And when you reach that point where somebody is coming or something is coming that is that's countering your version of the truth, or the countering your version of your truth, then you actually learn something, because you're not going to take the other side of the road into consideration until it's actually presented to you. So take the emotion out of it, take the negative connotation out of it, and reframe it and look at it as it is not a loss, but it's an opportunity to learn. That would be the advice that I would give.
And Holland, what type of advice would you offer?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what Jamal has shared. Just to add a bit more to that is, one of the first habits of highly effective people is to start with the end in mind. So when you begin trying to seek resolution, right? So that's the whole purpose. The end is resolution. It's not necessarily to start a fight, to start an argument, to prove someone to be inaccurate or insufficient, but really it is to get a resolution. And sometimes in that whole path towards resolution, yes, there is some tense times in interactions. And yes, sometimes someone is identified to be incorrect, but the goal is to resolve this matter so that all parties involved end up closer to meeting the overall objectives, right? Which is to continue moving forward on your career path, to continue to meeting the goals and objectives of your organization, and to continue to strengthen you as an individual, right? Always protecting and respecting our dignity and our human decency, right? So if that is our objective when we start out, right, we're seeking resolution so that we all end in a positive point so that we can continue moving forward. Because when we're seeking to be right, sometimes we sabotage the whole process and miss the great opportunity to seek true resolution.
Mm-hmm. Something that jumps out to me when I'm thinking about perspective, and especially when we start to think about the shoes that we wear, the life that we live, what we experience, and those experiences, they shape our perception and our worldview, right? Once those things are shaped, the interesting thing about it, we live, regardless of right or wrong or true or false, we live based upon our perspective and what we see. What might be some negatives? What might be some negatives from having a certain perspective on life? Not just in the sense of corporate trauma, but in the sense of just in general. And then we can kind of get into how it relates to corporate trauma. But when we're thinking about how a certain perspective might do certain things, and an example of that would be you believe that how you're treated at work or how you're treated in a relationship, that's just normal, right? That's just what it is. Now, however you're being treated, whether negative or positively, is here or there. But what's happening, you take it as that's just life. Jamal, what do you think about that?
What comes to mind, Robert, is that, what you're saying is the framework of a person that is stuck in their perspective. And that implies that that person thinks, whether it be overtly and consciously or subconsciously through their actions, that they have nothing else to learn. And when you stop learning, you stop expanding, you stop growing. And then now you are less likely, if not at all, able to reach your full potential, because it takes growth. It takes you gaining your perspective and then throwing it completely away, because whatever you decide upon, whatever you rest upon, whatever you settle on as far as a perspective, there's always going to be something that comes along and either knocks you on your ear based on that perspective, or it's going to shake you up to where you question it, and it's going to strengthen your perspective. But all in all, you can't be wedded to it so much that you bring on a negative results, because you are unwilling to learn enough to grow. That's what comes to mind when you ask that question.
Okay, thanks. And Holland, from your point of view, what do you think?
Well, I think the negative effects of someone who has such a limited perspective or worldview is that it lacks accountability, right? We understand that in leadership, and no matter whether we are managing others or we're just individual contributors, we all are considered leaders, even of our own career path. So as leaders, it's important to have accountability, in that you can't just have one perspective or one viewpoint without having someone who you can go to just kind of check it out, right? You have to be open to receive the feedback that'll help you understand, there is another way to view this, right? I was talking with one of my siblings recently and just kind of expressing, and I was all in my emotions, right? And I'd come to a conclusion and had worked out a whole plan. I said, hey, in the next 90 days, X, Y, and Z is going to be the fact. And she just calmly said to me, hey, you may not need to change buses. You just might need to change your seat. And oh my goodness, if that did not shine a floodlight of truth and reality on that situation. So it's important to have people that can hold you accountable and that are willing to tell you the honest truth so that you can broaden your perspective.
Awesome. So Holland, I'll come right back to you. So for the HR reps, the HR individuals who are listening, for the CEOs or the different individuals, the executives, if you have any advice to offer to them in regards to perspective and what might be the best way to approach employees or different reps within the organization and team members, what might that be?
Right. Excellent question. I think, again, I'm going back to the 7 habits, right? Habit 5 is seek first to understand, then be understood. So if there is any first step, I would always recommend ask questions. Gather as much information as you can before drawing any conclusions. And you may have been presented with a lot of information even before you start having one-on-one conversations. Always begin to seek even more information, because in that whole fact-finding process, you may get that little nugget of truth or nugget of insight that will help resolve this matter so that everyone feels respected and honored in this process, and help people move from such an emotional standpoint, because sometimes it can be triggered and charged with a lot of heavy emotions, but to create a movement to a more objective position as opposed to a subjective and emotional position. So in that process of asking questions, it really does create a lot more of an opportunity to really honor all parties involved.
And Jamal, from your side, if there was some advice that you can give to the individuals in HR, the executives, CEOs, what might you offer to those who are in the leadership positions?
Excellent question, Robert. And I'm gonna come right in behind Holland's response. When you ask those questions, and you're gonna get answers, and consider those answers But listen to me, executives, listen to me, HR generalists, and listen to me, CEOs. When you get that data, when you get that information, do not oversimplify the problem and complicate the solution. For example, if you have received information from asking these questions and making these observations that your environment, your culture is hostile or toxic to a particular marginalized group of people that are existing within your corporate construct, fix the problem. Understand that the problem is layered, it's complicated. We don't want to oversimplify. Well, these people over here are just feeling this type of way, so we're going to throw money at it. We're going to put we're going to pacify the situation. Understand the problem. Do your own research. Don't leave it up to the people that are feeling marginalized or that are suffering from what we are calling corporate trauma to do all the legwork to tell you what they're doing and then have to go a step beyond and educate you on what that means. Do your own research. It's complicated. And then when you get that information and you ascertain, whatever it is that you learn from doing some of your own research after listening and getting these answers, make the solution simple. You will be hailed as a visionary, as a thought leader, and as a thoughtful executive, and somebody that anybody would be willing to follow and or run through a brick wall for, if you just realize that the solutions are a lot of times a lot more simple than we try to make it when we complicate them, to try to hide behind principle and try to deny that the situation is what it is. Some of these situations are complicated. You're not going to be able to fix them overnight. But the solutions are simple. You just have to figure out a bridge from the problem to the solution.
Awesome. But now I got a follow-up question. Either one of you, both of you, it's my last question for you. Why is that so difficult to do? And that it's a combination of both of you. Heard some awesome things around people not being able to make the decision, people not being able to follow through, people not wanting to ask the questions, people not wanting to be in a situation where they have to turn around and actually open themselves up to hear and see things that they don't want to see and don't want to hear. Why is it so difficult? Why?
Well, Rob, it's difficult because it's only difficult. I'll put it like this. It's only difficult if you don't want to, right? And that sounds really simple. But if the desire is there to let go of the perception, then you'll do that. But what makes that difficult is people don't want to give up their privileged position, because it is a point of convenience. Because what makes this problem permeate is the fact that there are other individuals on the other side of the problem that have distinct advantages because of it, which eliminates their desire to want to solve it. It takes a really, really mature and big person, or a very professional and mature environment that the individuals in it that may be advantaged give up some of that space to make room for those that may not necessarily be benefited, or their their detriments are exposed through negative perceptions or stuck perceptions, which we know kind of feeds to corporate trauma. So that's what I would say.
Well, and I'll quickly add to that. It's one word: risk, right? We think about one of the primary goals of most corporations and people who are in leadership roles to support that corporation. The key effort is to make sure you reduce liability. So if there is an opportunity to maybe implement a simple resolution to something that's causing corporate trauma, but it puts the company at corporate risk or liability, then that whole discussion of a desire to want to implement a simple solution or to rid any sort of corporate constructs that create more opportunities for corporate trauma to exist, well, if it does not impair or impact the corporation's liability or risk factors, then it's really not a matter of concern. Because again, the whole objective is to protect the corporation and to reduce liabilities. So if it's not seen as a high enough risk, then it's not important enough. So the messaging has to be is corporations are responsible, and corporations have to be held accountable so that they understand that even though it may not be that you're filing a claim or that you're threatening some sort of litigation, but it still damages corporate reputation and it creates reputational risk. So that liability factor has to be addressed so that people feel empowered enough to still protect the corporation, but still protect people in the same wise. That's what we have to resolve.
Awesome. I don't know if I could ask another question to end it off any better. The thing I would just say in closing is when you're experiencing, whether it's hollow effect, whether it's anger, whether it's fear, anxiety, whatever part of corporate trauma you may be going through, one thing I do know is don't be afraid to speak on it. Don't be afraid to share. Don't be afraid to find help. And the last piece is don't expect that people understand. Because a lot of times when we're expecting that people understand, we end up becoming more angry that they don't help us. And I've learned over the past at least the past decade, I've learned one thing. Everybody isn't as smart or as emotionally intelligent as you think they are. No matter where their IQ is, it doesn't mean that they can pick up on the cues that matter. And when I'm talking about those cues, I'm talking about the cues that have something to do with the people, that have something to do with life. So when you're going through these different things and you're experiencing difficult times and work is like hell on earth, but you get a paycheck at the end of the week, when you're experiencing those different things, reach out for help. Whether it's someone in HR or you're reaching out to the corporate trauma team. At the end of the day, like it's always said, new name for an old condition. Our job as a corporate trauma team is to find a way to help you stop experiencing these things in silence. With that being said, have a great day.